it will be not only disrespectful, but it will be inappropriate to go to a person in grieving and say, no, this is about happiness and don't worry about it. It's not appropriate. You really have to be fully present in that loss and in that sadness and in that suffering and in that adversity to be able to then overcome it.
Welcome to Happiness for Humanity. I'm Rania Badruddin, the happiness consultant from Egypt. Join me and my guests for an hour of meaningful conversations for a happier world. In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Edith Shiro, clinical psychologist and author of the book, The Unexpected Gift of Trauma. Welcome to the show, Edith.
Thank you, Rania. This is such a pleasure to be sharing time with you and having a talk with you. This is and congratulations on this new podcast. This is very exciting.
Thank you very much. I wanted to talk about trauma because I don't feel that we can talk about happiness without first talking about trauma, because obviously trauma affects us. It affects us deeply, and I don't think that we can fully experience or be on a happiness journey without first moving through, healing through trauma. Of course, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I really think that sometimes even the well-meaning happiness practices or the best happiness advice, if you're applying it when you have deep trauma, it can actually hinder your happiness because you're kind of doing something, but it's not working because you really need to dig deeper. So that's why I'm really, really happy to have you on the show today. And let's just jump right into the topic of trauma. What is it? What is it? And how does it affect us?
Yes, and thank you for considering trauma in the context of happiness, because usually people don't put those two together. And as you very well say, and in my almost 30 years of experience clinically and research and personally, I see this happen over and over and over, in which people that are in the process of becoming happier or growing or becoming more conscious also have side by side the suffering and the pain and the loss that they have to deal with. So there's not one without the other. That's why the book that I wrote that came out recently is called The Unexpected Gift of Trauma. It's like, how do you put the word gift and the word trauma in the same sentence? And that's precisely the point. Is like, you want to get to the gift, or you want to get to the well-being and the happiness, you have to deal with the trauma. When you deal with the trauma, conversely, you also get happiness and well-being on the other, if you deal with it. So what is trauma? Trauma is any experiences that we have individually or collective that have shattered our belief system, that have made us not be able to deal with things that happen to us in relationship to ourselves, to others of the world, and for which we have no tools, for which we have no capacity to deal with. So any situation, any event, any experience in our life for which we have no capacity to deal with, and that shatters and overwhelms our system. So
okay, that's great. You mentioned again the name of the book, and I wanted to talk to you about that, because for somebody maybe who is currently experiencing trauma or hasn't fully healed through it, that title, they would probably have an issue with it. They'll probably be thinking, are you serious? You're telling me that what I'm going through or what I've gone through is a gift? And they would really question that. So what would you say?
Yes, and that's a really great question. And I appreciate that. And people have come to me and said that. When somebody gets triggered by that title that says, how can you say gift and trauma in the same sentence? It's because they're at the very, very beginning of their traumatic experience. And it's extremely acceptable and understandable that when you're in the midst of dealing with your suffering, it's so black, you're so inside a hole, and you're so limited by your own suffering and the suffering around you, that there's no hope to be seen. There's not, it's that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, which really characterizes what trauma is, right? It's a fragmentation, an isolation, a break. And it's like when you're in there, when we were in the middle of the pandemic at the very beginning, when when you were in the middle of a war, when somebody suffering sexual abuse, domestic violence, the loss of a loved one, you're in the middle of that grieving of loss, right? How can you be talking about anything good? You can't talk about happiness, you can't talk about well-being, you can't talk about gifts, right? And that's really important to acknowledge, Rania, because it will be not only disrespectful, but it would be inappropriate to go to a person in grieving and say, no, this is about happiness and don't worry about it. It's not appropriate. You really have to be fully present in that loss and in that sadness and in that suffering and in that adversity to be able to then overcome it. So yes,
Right.
it's timing, because when people are already along the lines more further in their process of post-traumatic growth and the process of grieving and the process of growing, then the beginning of hopefulness, then that light at the end of the tunnel starts to show up.
Right. Okay. So that's perfect. And yeah, I'm glad we talked about that, because I can imagine somebody listening in who's maybe at that stage. They're either in the trauma or they haven't fully healed from a previous trauma, and so that triggers them, that title. But what you're saying is it's perfectly normal not to feel it's a gift right now, because we can't see that, and at the same time, it's very possible that in the future we can reap the benefits of the healing or of the growth. So we're not really saying, though, that no, I'm super glad that happened to me. That's not the point. But the point is, even though that happened to me, here I am today, and look where I am now versus where I was. Is that right?
At the beginning, yes, that's what people say. They say, even though this is what's happened to me, I am committed to the process of growing and I am committed to the process of healing. But you know what's so crazy and fascinating is that all these years that I've worked with traumatic experiences, with people, with groups, with collective, when they already reach that healing place and that post-traumatic growth place, they say to me, I am grateful for what happened to me. It's not in spite of what happened, but because of what happened to me, that I'm the person who I am today, that I'm grateful that I've developed all these capacities, all this awareness, all this growth. And they say that. It sounds crazy. They say that I don't wish this on anybody. I don't want, bad things to happen to anybody, but I'm so grateful that this happened, because otherwise I would have never been to who I am today, or I've never would have gotten to where I am today if it wasn't for this very, very difficult, challenging situation.
Which means then that we can actually, that's something to think about then. What you're saying, I think, is that we can actually be grateful for things that we didn't want to happen, or things that are actually horrible. But in the future, at some point, we can actually be grateful for them. That's because we grew through them, right? We learned from them. We came out the other end probably wiser, stronger. And is that the actual gift? Is the gift the growth, or is the gift the happiness and well-being? What is the actual gift?
So yes, so it's not, very important to clarify that some people say, oh, well, something bad happens to me, immediately I have to feel the growth and the happiness and the well-being. No, it's not like that at all. It really requires a process. It requires hard work. It requires for us to be sitting in the present and embracing everything that is happening. And it takes time. This is not a quick situation. It takes time to really delve into it and to process it and to do it at different levels, emotionally and physically. Our bodies also embrace all of this, and that our bodies remember the trauma, and our bodies like absorb all the difficult situations since we're born and before, even in our, in our mother's womb, and even through our DNA, our information in our cells. So we have a lot of information that we carry, and until we embrace that, and until we sit with it, and it takes time to unpack, it takes time to accept it, it takes time to heal little by little in so many ways and so many levels, this growth doesn't happen. So that's a very important point to clarify. And most of the time, Rania, we don't do it alone. That's the other thing.
Yes.
That for us to go through this process of healing, as you and I know, that come from the community of happiness, and we come from the community of sharing like that, we need community. We need, even a one person that cares about you, a therapist, a family member, a spiritual healer, leader, and a group of people around you that can say, I'm with you, I can do this, you can do this, you'll come out of it better than you were before. But it takes time. And what happens on the other side of this process is that what I call, which is post-traumatic growth, which we've mentioned, and I so appreciate. And post-traumatic growth is the positive consequences that happen out of a difficult traumatic situation. It's the positive outcomes, spiritually, physically, emotionally, psychologically, socially, and you see it everywhere around, that happen after going through this process. What does that mean? Yes, that means that you are a happier person all around. It does. It means that you have more meaningful relationships all around. It means that you have more of a sense of purpose in your life. You and I have talked when we met, and back in the University for Peace, right, in Costa Rica. It's like, having a mission, having a purpose, that happiness is not just being happy one day. It's linked to a sense of belonging, a sense of giving back, a sense of like doing things for others in the community, of having actively having a goal in life that is bigger than you. All of that is post-traumatic growth.
Right.
And right.
Yeah. And so it's really important to remember as well that you do not have to do everything alone. So that's a really important point. I think I'm the kind of person who, when I was at my sort of lowest moments or struggling the most, I would disappear and try to do everything alone. And I did that for the most of my adult life, until I realized at some point, I need somebody. I need outside help. And it really helped me to do that, to actually get outside help. So if anybody, feels like they've got to do things alone, you really don't. And so like you said, rightly so, I mean, just find somebody who will listen without judgment, whether that's a therapist, or it's a friend or a family member or whoever, or maybe a group of people who regularly meet because they're also struggling, whatever. But we really don't have to do things alone, and community is so wonderful. Now, I'm somebody who's, I'm a bit of an introvert. I tend to do things alone. So if somebody's listening and, you're a bit of an introvert as well, that's fine. Then you don't need to go for a big community, but, maybe a one-on-one thing with somebody. But there's always somebody that can help you through. So I'm really glad you mentioned that idea of we don't have to do things alone.
That's so important. That's important. That's important to say something about that, because, Rania, we also live in a culture that reinforces the idea that if you're so powerful and you're so independent and you can take on everything and you're so resilient, that's the best thing. And I'm here to tell you, no. It's the people that are vulnerable and that are able to reach out. It's the people that have the courage, because it takes a lot of courage to stay with your feelings, to say, hey, you know what? I cannot do it by myself. It really takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
You would think that it's the opposite, but it's like, I have to be strong enough to say, Rania, I can't do this by myself. To admit to myself, to radically admit, to radically accept, I can't. I surrender. This is bigger than me, bigger than what I thought. And I'm going to step out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to reach out to somebody else.
Yeah, and that's actually strength. Like you said, it's not weakness. I used to think it was weakness, and you're right, because I was like this entrepreneur who's done all these things, and I kind of fell into this idea that this is what I need to do, like appear strong and appear like I've got my everything together, you know. And of course, I don't have everything together, and of course, I don't know what I'm doing all the time. I'm just doing my best day to day. Yeah, and I got tired of sort of pretending like I had to, you know, be this person who knows stuff. I'm just a regular person, and I'm just doing stuff that is meaningful to me. And yes, I very much needed help along the way. I just waited like 40 something years to get the help. People don't need to wait that long, you know. I mean, I'm 54 now. I think it was maybe only 8 years ago when I finally sort of had this, you know, the strength to be vulnerable, actually, and to talk about things and to dig deep down. And so that was at the time when I was doing NLP and hypnotherapy, and I was getting my certification. So that was like super powerful, because I was really digging deep and finding things that I didn't know were there. And it seems scary at first because you don't know what you're going to find, but whatever it is, the beauty of it is that when it comes to the surface and to your conscious awareness, you can move through it, you can heal through it. So we don't need to be afraid of what trauma is there, or what's hidden in the deep recesses of our minds, because that's part of us. And just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's not a part of us. It's affecting us. We just aren't aware maybe of the effect. So I think go in there, dig deep, you know, with the help of somebody, and work through those things. Now that's actually, that takes us to the next question, which is, okay, so we know trauma affects us. We know that we want to heal through it so that we can find the growth and the happiness on the other end. But how do we do that? And first of all, how do we even know that there's trauma? I mean, are there certain symptoms or things to look out for?
Yes, that's funny. That's exactly what I was going to tell you now, which is sometimes, I would say most of the time, we grow up without knowing that there are certain experiences that we've had that have been traumatic and that determine the choices that we make in life. And a classical example of that is the difficulties that we had growing up, let's say with our parents, with our family members. And I'm not saying that everything is traumatic, but I'm saying is that some traumatic experiences growing up then shape the decisions that we make in terms of looking for a partner in life. So we either choose a partner that allows us to repeat those traumatic experiences, believe it or not. So if you come from a family in which there was some abuse or some violence or some aggression or some disrespect or some negligence, you know, neglect, being neglected, usually you would find partners in life, romantic partners, or, you know, how to create a family of your own that have those characteristics, because that's what's familiar, that's what you know, that's what's the need of our nervous system to keep repeating that kind of stimulation. So imagine how trauma can affect us to the point that even when we're creating our future, we're basing it on our past traumas. Other people have make choices of instead of repeating that trauma, to repair the trauma. Right? Which is like, let me find the partner that it's like so easy to get along, that it's completely not threatening, that it's like super open, and but at the same time we're choosing from the place of trauma, because it's the trauma, the childhood trauma, that is determining if we're going to repeat or we're going to repair. So it's still under the umbrella of like those early experiences that were traumatic. And those are harder to pinpoint because they're like ongoing, and it happens when we're children. When you have one event, let's say an earthquake, or the loss of a close family member or a friend or a partner, or, you know, those are more specific events, or like sexual abuse in the moment, or moving countries, you know, the trauma of like leaving your home country and going someplace else involuntarily, let's say. Those are specific events that you can see more clearly. Okay, this has been traumatic for me. And look, I am anxious and I'm depressed and I can't sleep and my eating habits have changed and my whole body is constantly being reactive to what's happening around. I don't trust anybody. I don't understand how the life functions. I don't like myself and I don't like others. You know, I'm in the middle of surviving, you know, instead of like living. These are all typical symptoms of trauma, and they're easier to identify when there's an event. But when you have ongoing chronic trauma, for example, you've always been rejected in society because of your skin color, because of your religion, because of you're a woman, because you are an outsider, because you're a, you know, an immigrant that doesn't have a place in that community. Like there's, or you're being bullied as a child, and it's an ongoing situation all the time. It's harder to then see what are the reactions that you have and the trauma responses that you have that have always been there. So it really takes time and a space for really stop and look at yourself. And usually other things happen in life that shake you to start looking at these things and say, wow, I have been traumatized for a long time, or I have been in trauma response for a long time. And this is how I know how to live. And what would be an alternative? What else how can I exist in the world in a healthier way? Right? How can I trust people? How can I live without reacting all the time? How can my body be at peace and not have to be in like high levels of adrenaline and cortisol and like in alarm mode with anxiety, like, you know, everything is dangerous and life is dangerous and we're surrounded by danger. It takes time. That's part of the process of growth, and that's part of the process of healing.
So we actually have to be very gentle with ourselves through that process, and very compassionate and sort of non-judgmental, right? Because I think it's really hard enough in the first place to be experiencing those trauma responses, but then to feel like, okay, now I want to heal through them, but then to start to judge oneself for like, okay, why am I not healing? And why is it taking so much time? And so then you're kind of accumulating negative emotions, right?
Yeah.
So it is pretty tricky, which is why it needs support. You know, you probably need support. You probably need outside help, because you kind of need somebody to hold your hand through it. But like you said, though, a lot of it is getting still enough with ourselves and daring to actually slow down enough to be with ourselves and to hear, you know, the thoughts inside, and then to be able to pull out what's in there that needs processing. But in the end, we're going to have to feel those emotions in order to move through them. We're not going to be able to just, you know, shove them under a carpet or just forget about them or things like that. And I think that's an important thing that you already talked about. What about other people around us? So if I'm going to talk now to somebody who is not necessarily at the moment experiencing trauma themselves, but they have a loved one who is, how can they help that person? And actually, how can they be harming inadvertently that person?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I love that what you said, that sentence, daring to slow down. That's I love it. That's a beautiful way of saying that. And you know, part of what I think it's helpful for others, believe it or not, I recommend buying the book, because
Yes.
in my book, yeah, it's not just for the people that have gone through trauma and are going through trauma, but for the people that are helping others. Because in here, I delineate the 5 stages of post-traumatic growth, how to go from trauma to growth, and exercises and everything. So one of the things that we can do as helpers or as caretakers or as friends or family of somebody that have been traumatized is, first of all, give the person the space and the validation to express their emotions. So, you know, what, when somebody dies, it's like, oh, you're gonna get over it super quick, or you can grieve for 5 minutes or 1 week, but then you have to start being happy and enjoy the world and just go out and forget about it, forget about everything, right? Isn't that typical? So I don't recommend that, because what
No.
it does, right, is like put it under the rug, or put Band-Aid on it. No, you sit with it. You sit with it. And for the caretakers or the family members, it's like giving permission for that person to grieve, to express their feelings, to express their emotions. And sometimes, it's hard as a caretaker, because it creates a lot of anxiety, and it's like, oh, it's hard to tolerate so much pain, or so much, so many emotions. But that's one of the very helpful things to do. The other helpful thing to do is to recognize that this is a process. So don't rush the person. Don't rush the
Yes.
person. Let the person grieve. I mean, there are beautiful like guidelines in different religions. For example, I can tell you in Judaism, there's really clear guidelines in grief. For example, like you grieve for a week, the first week in one way, then the first month in a different way, and then the first year in a different way. In psychology, we have also guidelines for griefs. There are 5 stages of grieving, for example. Like all these things need to be understood and addressed, and allow the person to go through the cycle. Because if you interrupt that cycle, it's going to come up again, and it's going to come up worse.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is super helpful is, don't just stay in your head. Be in your body. Like, go be with nature. Go swim in the lake, in the ocean. Go listen to the birds. Hug a tree. Go to the
Yes.
park. Right? Move
Maybe even
your
dance.
body. That's
Yeah.
super, super, super important. Dancing is not just because it's fun. Dancing gives the message to our body that we're at peace, that everything is good. It regulates all of our nervous system. It regulates our cortisol levels, or serotonin and dopamine. Like, it really, really helps. Art, music, it's fundamental to the well-being. Like, how do we incorporate listening to music, dancing, singing, painting, drawing, writing, all these things that they seem like they're minimum, they're like the most important things to do. Because sometimes it's not about the talking. Sometimes the words are not really what helps. Sometimes it's that movement and that more holistic way of being, that it's non-verbal. And that, we as caretakers, or as a group, as a community, as a society, we can incorporate that for a community that has been suffering trauma, or for an individual that has been going through it. So, for example, working with, here in Miami, there was a building that collapsed 2 years ago, and 98 people died. And it was very sudden, and it affected the whole community. Really, it was a big, big, big event. It was like a mini 9/11. And one of the things that we did after talking and talking, we gather in groups, in community, like hundreds of people together, to talk, to grieve, to cry. But then slowly, some of the people said, you know what, I can't even deal with therapy, talking therapy. I'm going to do ceramics. I'm going to do, like sewing and knitting. I'm going to do some singing and dancing. And those were things. So I'm going to do some decoration. And these were things that, or travel, or they went on hiking, on pilgrimages. And these were very important things to heal the community, to heal the people. And this is ongoing. I'm not saying it stopped, but it was interesting to see that it's not just the talk, but it's also all these other elements that allow for a healing to happen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I do agree so much. Nature, music, art, all these forms of expression, they're actually valuable because they do keep you still with yourself. If you're doing, I remember in Costa Rica, I did forest bathing. It was so beautiful. It was so therapeutic. And somebody might say, yeah, but isn't that, sort of just a distraction? And in a way, I think it is a bit of a distraction, but it's also, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the kind of distraction that does keeps you in the moment, and it kind of allows you to, tap into yourself a little bit. So in that sense, it could also have, definitely healing properties.
Yeah, it's not a distraction. No, 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 no,
It's
no.
not a
When you are
distraction.
in the
Okay.
no, when you're in the present moment, it doesn't mean that you constantly have to think about your difficulty or your pain or your suffering. Being in the present moment and connecting with your body is the opposite. Is being very present. It's not distracting. Distraction is when you're playing a video game.
Right.
Distraction is when you are doing some addictive behavior, alcohol or drugs, or you're spending money in a casino, or you're doing obsessive shopping, or those are distractions, because
Okay.
it disconnects you from who you are, from your present moment, from your body. It disconnects you completely. It like cuts off, right? It dissociates. We dissociate all the time, like when we're driving and we go from one place to another and we don't remember how we got there. That's dissociation. So the more you do of those dissociation, that's distraction. That doesn't allow
Right.
you to heal. But when
Okay.
you are in your forest and you're connected with yourself and you're meditating, or you're like just simply looking at the butterfly that is going there, and you feel it and you allow for that experience to be part of yourself, that's being very present and very connected.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think I just said that to myself. It kind of shows that I maybe think those are distracting me from dealing with the grief, because I've had grief recently, and
Yes.
this was the beginning of the year,
Uh-huh.
but it's been taking me a while. And actually, this podcast was my first thing that I do in a long time. But I think I was
That's
just judging
beautiful.
myself right there when I said
Mhm.
that it's a distraction, because I think I've been kind of pushing myself to move through the grief faster or something. But
Yes.
so it's interesting that you mentioned that there's a very big difference between being mindful, being in the moment through art, music, nature, or whatever, or just, which I also do, just playing games or watching shows. I do those.
Of
I do
course,
those.
we all do. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I appreciate so much, Rania, that you're sharing that, because that happens to all of us.
yeah,
And yeah, part of the grief is like we judge ourselves and like, what's wrong with me? Why can I snap out of it?
yeah,
Like, why am I still sad? Or how come I'm being affected by this? I shouldn't. And I have
yeah.
to show the world that I'm happy and that I'm doing well. And I have to put on my Instagram and on my LinkedIn that, oh my God, my work is thriving and I'm doing great and I can overcome every obstacle. And the truth is that sometimes just being present and allow yourself to be present with yourself, with no judgment and with a lot of compassion, it's really what takes you through.
Yes,
It's like it's counterintuitive, but it's those moments of like being completely present and, like you say, slowing down, that luxury of slowing down and saying, I'm just gonna look at that tree, and I'm just gonna be in the forest and see the sun coming out. Like
yes,
those are the moments that are really, really healing. That contemplation, with ourselves and the world,
yeah,
because that creates connection. Again, it connection in your brain. Your neurotransmitters start to connect again, and it creates connection with nature, so you feel bigger than yourself, and that's a containment. And it creates connection with other beings, because then you come back and you say, I'm open to receiving. I'm open to do a podcast. I can do a podcast now. I'm not
yes,
closed up and I'm not defended and I'm not feeling everything is dangerous. I'm like open to receive. And
yes.
that's really what healing is, and what happiness is. Talking about happiness is being in the moment.
Yeah,
It's
whatever
being
that moment is, actually. It's happiness isn't about feeling good all the time, also, and I think that's kind of a misconception. It's maybe a definition that some people have of happiness, or maybe it's a definition that gets marketed a lot. You're going to be happy if you drink this, but that's not the definition of happiness that's going to be sustainable at all. So happiness is really whatever's happening in the moment. How can I live that purposefully? How can I sort of be and do whatever is aligned with me, right? Whatever the moment is. And sometimes the moment feels like it sucks, to be honest. But it's what we do then as well. I think that's, for me, that's when I pulled out all the tools and all the learnings.
yeah.
And actually, because I'm also writing my first book,
Aha.
it's been being written for like a year and a half. And I slowed down for a while, and for a while I was like, is this book, does it even make sense? Because I feel quite miserable right now. So am I going to be putting something in this book that isn't even true? And the nice thing is, though, that I was able to test all of the content on myself, and then realize, oh, okay, this stuff actually does work, even when you feel really bad. It just takes time. Sometimes, and it takes some patience, and it takes just continuously, either reaching out to somebody today, or just doing something with your body, like you said, moving, or sometimes they're just little things here and there. And there are some days when the best I could do was just, get out of bed, and whatever,
Exactly.
it's okay, right? You have to
Right.
give yourself the time and the space to do whatever you need to do to move forward in a
Right.
healthy way.
Right.
And maybe just don't shut yourself out completely from the rest of the world would be maybe my tip. I guess you would agree with that, because sometimes if we just close off a little bit too much, or at least that's what I felt, we get so much in our own head that it's hard to even do those positive things anymore.
Yeah,
What do you
and
think
that's
about
why,
that?
yeah, and that's why we need people around, Rania, because sometimes we can't do it on our own, and sometimes the tendency is to shut ourselves down and to disconnect and to isolate. And that's where the others come in and say, hey, Rania, no, come back. We want you, we need you, we miss you. And that's how you come out of it. Or, because it's hard to do it on your own sometimes,
But you just made me realize, though, that also it's also important to find the right person or people, because not everybody is going to be able to talk to people in a way that is non-judgmental, or some
Right.
people very well-meaning. Actually, people might just say, "Oh, come on, don't worry about that. It's fine." So then they're kind of sort of what they call gaslighting now, or and as we said
Yeah.
before earlier in the episode, that you don't want to do that. So I think you need to
Sorry.
find, no, it's okay, bless you. You need to
Right.
find, if you meet people who do that, and you don't feel that that's helping you, that's fine. They're just not the right people. That's fine. That's their perception right now, or that's where they are right now. Maybe that's how they talk to themselves even. Then you just need to maybe move on and find somebody else. But just find somebody who can listen, or actually ask around for a good therapist, especially when we're talking about trauma, because trauma is that's pretty heavy thing to do on your own. So I guess
but
that
I
would be a
think,
recommendation as well.
yeah, but I think in general, Rania, to surround yourself with people in which you really feel safe and you feel protected and you feel like you're belonging to groups in your life and to tribes and to a collective. It's not even just one person in which you can be yourself. I mean, I know this is hard, and it's a big toll that I'm saying. It's like, okay, how can you feel safe to be yourself in a group? But that's the kind of thing that I think makes a big difference, is that instead of isolating ourselves, is to put our effort into creating community around, into building relationships around that are meaningful. Because if you're, like you're saying, the example of, like, you become isolated or you're traumatized or you start fragmenting or disconnecting, you have other people that are saying, hey, we're here, hey, come back, hey, are you okay? And these are things that I think we've lost a little bit with technology, in which everybody's in their own world with their own phones and their own computers. And that, like, natural checking in of community, like when you go to the cafe or when you go to eat or when you go to walk in the park, that you see other people checking in on each other, having like those informal small talk conversations that are part of our sense of belonging and our sense of being, and that creates a lot of wellness and well-being. And it really allows for us to send the message like, you're safe, you're in a safe place, you can trust others, you belong to the human being community, even that, and
Yes.
that I think is something that us in this field have to, like, constantly nurture and send that message and allow for people to say, you need to do more of it, not less, more.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's a beautiful it's a beautiful thing to talk about towards the end of this episode, because yeah, community. I mean, this is why I started the podcast as well, because I realized I want to have these conversations. and I want to have them with you, and I want to have them with other people who I've met from different parts of the world and people from Egypt as well. But, that was my way of sort of still being in the comfort of my home, but actually talking to people and, getting out there. So just, even if it's a tiny step, you take that one step today, and then, another day you can take another step. And after a while, all those steps add up and you've really moved forward. So I think for whoever's listening, don't be hard on yourself, and don't even think of giant leaps. You don't have to think of giant leaps now. If you want to, that's great. Sure, go ahead. You could also, though, just think of a tiny step in the direction of how you would rather feel or be or do, and then just take that one tiny step today, and that's good enough. So would you like to say something else to people listening or watching us today?
Yes, I do. I actually do. First, I want to say, I do want to say thank you for opening a space like this to talk about topics that are, I think, very relevant, and to use your example and your experience and your struggles to get to where you are now, because this is really what post-traumatic growth is, So
Yes.
this podcast is a good example of post-traumatic
Yes.
growth, right?
Yes, I think so.
Right. So in my book, and I really encourage all of you to see it, to check it, the Unexpected Gift of Trauma, I do talk about the 5 stages to go through this process. And I think that's super helpful. And I want to say that I'm always grateful and admiring when people get to those stages of growth, how beautiful it is to see that giving back and that connection to the community, into the whole, and how people that have gone through difficulty themselves, they become the experts in that. And then they say, not only I feel good with myself, and not only I'm doing better and I'm happier and I'm more in a better place, but I also want to give it to other people. I want to teach other people, or I want to help other people that went through the same thing, that are going through the same thing, because I've done it, so I can help others to do it. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see and to do. So I'm always, admiring and embracing people that are reaching this place. And of course, this is an ongoing, process, because, we reach that place of growth and happiness and well-being, and then it goes again. And it cycles and cycles and cycles, and it goes from all of us in our own families, in our own generations. It spreads out. It's not just when you do the work for yourself, you not just do it for yourself, but you do it for everybody around you as well, because it can be contagious. That growth and that happiness can be contagious.
Exactly, which is why I mean this podcast is here for for the listener to be happier, but I also know that if people are happier, the world inevitably will be a happier place. And wouldn't that be a lovely thing to witness? So, one person at a time, here we are, sharing some knowledge, some experiences. I really appreciate you and everything that you do. And thank you so much for sharing what you shared today. I know that it's going to be valuable to the listener or to whoever's watching us. Maybe one day you'll come on again, and you'll have your next book, and we'll talk about that. Who knows? Meanwhile, guys, go ahead and check out that book. Buy it. It's available on Amazon, or where is it available?
It's available on Amazon. You can put my name, Dr. Edith Shiro, or you can put The Unexpected Gift of Trauma. It's available on all the bookstores, any bookstore in the United States. It's also being published in the UK, if that's closer to you. That's available in the UK. It's available in Hungary. It's available in the Netherlands. And hopefully, I think it's being translated into Arabic.
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
So as soon as I get the Arabic version, I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah,
So we
please.
can do.
And is there a soft copy and a hard copy, kind of?
Yeah, there's the soft copy, the hard copy, the audiobook, the Kindle. Like, you have all those options. So no excuse not to read it. No excuse.
Yes. So yeah, and of course we do hope that anybody who's listening, experiencing trauma, wanting to work through it, yes, please do check this book out, and we're here for you, and you can do it. Thank you so much again for joining me today, and yeah, we'll see you another time.
Thank you, Rania. Thank you. Thank you. Big hug, big blessings. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Join me every other Thursday for a new one. Happiness for Humanity is available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. If you found this episode valuable, please share it. Let's come together for a happier world.